Hello, my name is Maria Bezubova and you're at my channel Fertilizers Jazz. Here we talk about events, trends, technologies in the world of fertilizers and agriculture. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and let's jazz! Today is November 18, 2024, and it is a weekly markets update. Let's have a look at the news of week 46 and see what are the next trends. Also, please check out my interview with Greg Molnar, gas analyst at International Energy Agency, that was published last Wednesday. Greg shared his insights regarding current status of international gas market and forecasts for the end of 2024 and Q1 2025. So, don't miss the jazz! Indian tender was finalized with targeted volume over 1 million tons from 13 suppliers. The lowest price proposed by Samsung was not a surprise. It was around preliminary forecasted level, $362 CFR West Coast. In the previous October tender, the price was just $2.5 higher. In the current tender, the main surprise was that producers not only from Middle East and Baltics dominated, but African and Southeast Asian producers competed with them. As a result, around 500,000 tons was proposed to the tender from Middle East, and the netback around $340 to $50 FOB, about 200,000 tons from Russian producers, at the netback around $310 FOB, several cargoes from Nigeria at around $330 FOB, and several cargoes from Malaysia at around $340 FOB. Taking into account current production rates in India, as well as imports lineup, analysts evaluate potential deficit for the marketing year April 24-March 25 to reach 2 million tons of urea. It means that, as we already discussed before, India will tender more. Perhaps, in order to secure enough volume, it will happen sometimes in January. Sluggish demand from Europe and other markets pushed producer stocks up and stimulated them to decrease expected price level. Not only Middle East suppliers dropped the prices at least by $10 or more to place products in the tender, but such demand situation also provoked a price rally in the Northern Africa. Egyptian producers built stocks for October and half November, coming to the edge of their comfort zone, and last week decided to clear the stocks. In a 24 hours rally, they sold around 50 to 60,000 tons at the level of high 330s to mid 40s, which means $20 to $25 decline versus values of last week. After reaching this bottom, next round of sales was conducted at the levels of high 350s to 60 FOB. Totally 87,000 tons were sold last week at this level. So, all in all, around 150,000 tons were cleared from the stocks, and it happened as quickly as within 48 hours. On top of these granular urea sales, a cargo of 50,000 tons prilled was sold to India. Wow, what's a week! So now Egyptian producers feel comfortable again with certain volumes available for sales already for second half December. Egyptian rally stimulated some fresh sales to Turkey and Romania. However, in general, European demand remained slow. In the Black Sea, during this downward rally, SOCAR sold around 30 to 40,000 tons of product at the level around $330 or even lower. After several unsuccessful tenders, producer also needed to clear its stocks. Latin American and especially Brazilian demand remains subdued for some time. Brazil feels comfortable with a significant imports lineup for November, as well as plenty of floating material nearby. So importers are not willing to inquire at price higher than 345 CFR. In October, imports marked an all-time record of 1.2 million tons. And even Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan volumes arrived to Brazil amid low demand in European markets. However, the purchasing season tails off. In the US, distribution demand is very slow. However, barges were changing hands at higher price versus a week ago. November barges sold around $315 for short ton. In Ethiopia, the tender will be closed tomorrow, so let's follow further news. Paper values stabilized after a massive drop last week in front of the tender. Egypt FOB dipped by $10 for November, in line with sales that took place during the week, but rebounded by $10 for December to the average of 350 FOB. January value corrected downward slightly to the average of $362. Normal FOB also corrected marginally up to the average of $317 for short ton for November, $323.4 for December and January. Arab Gulf FOB showed different dynamics, decreasing marginally for November in line with the actual values proposed to India, and increasing for December to the average of $351. Brazil CFR remained unchanged for November, rebounding slightly for both December and January. Ammonium sulfate market prices continued to be under pressure amid downward corrections in global nitrogen prices, as well as lack of demand from Brazil, which remains almost the only liquid market for now. The price level of granular material dropped to 160 CFR, with inquiries already circulating in the mid-150s. Total Brazilian imports for 10 months of 2024 already reached 4.1 million tons, 10% higher versus a year ago. That weighs on further import demand. In China, copper sold price decreased as well to the level of low to mid-130s FOB for December. Also, the freight rates increased sharply last week for the voyages from China, which increased pressure at FOB price level. In Europe, AMSUL price remains mostly unchanged, but starts softening despite tight supply. In Turkey, AMSUL purchases started to revive in front of spring season. Importers tried to take advantage of bearish market and push offers lower than 150 CFR level that was seen for the last purchases. Still, Turkish consumers are not in rush yet, because current volumes are being sold for December. In nitrates market in Europe, ideas of sellers and buyers diverged last week. Buyers are expecting price deterioration in line with urea values. At the same time, producers are concerned with recent hike in the natural gas prices, provoked by multiple uncertainties related to gas supply in upcoming months. So, as a result, activity in the market is minimal. Same situation continues in UAN segment. In ammonia market, prices in the west and east of Suez diverged for the second or third consecutive week. In the west, prices continued firming for Europe, where last week price increased by $15 to $615 to $20 CFR amid gains in Northern African values. Spot demand continues emerging, and growing TTF natural gas future prices discourage European producers of ammonia. Shipments from Algeria to Spain are expected to resume soon after more than 2 years of political dispute. Algerian exporters are waiting for export licenses now. In the US, autumn application still remains on hold, so prices slipped more during last week. East of Suez, prices dropped again. In India, delivered prices slipped to $440 to $65 CFR amid shrinking demand. Most buyers are comfortable now with their lineup for December, supported by resumed contract shipments from Ma'aden, so spot demand is really slim. The situation also weighs on prices in other parts of Asia, where indicative bids are heard as low as $420 to $40 CFR East Asia. In phosphate segment, the demand in Europe, Brazil and the US is almost non-existing now. As well as in India, import activity was low last week. India purchased 50,000 tons of Chinese DAP at $636 CFR, and total imports year-to-date reached 4.21 million tons. It is 2.4 million tons less than last year, meaning that the DAP shortage that we discussed for already several months is ongoing. Ethiopian ABC is understood to purchase around 600,000 tons of product under its October 28 tender. 195,000 tons is expected to arrive from China, the rest most likely from Russia. Chinese product will be supplied mostly at $610 FOB China. In Bangladesh, it is understood the Minister of Agriculture has issued a new purchase tender for an unspecified quantity of DAP and TSP, closing on November 18. Shipment has been requested by December 31. Under the previous ministry purchase tender, which closed a week ago, DAP offers were heard in the $692 to $97 CFR range. It is unclear whether the ministry will end up buying all those prices. Some market players consider this new purchase tender as an indication that the previous tender has been scrapped. In China, DAP prices firmed to $615 to $20 FOB amid the confirmation of the business to Ethiopia. Now, most of the Chinese producers are sold out almost until the end of the year and are comfortable. Ma'aden hasn't reported any sales last week. Egyptian producers' availability is also very limited until the end of the year. Moving to the fundamentals. European natural gas futures surged to above 45 euros per megawatt hour, close to their highest level since October 2023, mostly amid uncertainties related to supply. After Austria OMV won in arbitration against Gazprom and declined to pay, Russian supplier informed the company that supply will be suspended as of Saturday, November 16, and in fact stopped supply while pumping steady volumes for other European countries. Austrian Chancellor announced that Austria will not have problems with supply this winter due to alternatives prepared and storage full at 93%. But the market is nervous, of course, so futures prices increased. More uncertainty is awaiting with unclear fate of transit through Ukraine after January 1. There are several countries in Europe which are still dependent on Russian pipeline gas, and one of them, Slovakia, announced that it signed a one-year contract with SOCAR to supply gas instead of Russian, as a test that might be prolonged with long-term contract in case it is successful. As we discussed last week in the interview with Greg Molnar, too many uncertainties are in front of us, so there is no reason for future price at TTF to decrease further during heating season. Clearly, European fertilizers producers will be struggling in upcoming season to maintain costs at the workable level. US natural gas futures fluctuated around $2.8 per MMBTU due to robust supply to the storages. Now gas in storage is more than 6% above the seasonal norm. This marks the fourth consecutive week of above-average storage builds, a trend not observed since October 2022. While heating demand is expected to increase later in November as colder weather sets in, forecasts indicate warmer than usual conditions for now. In more long perspective, Trump nomination of Chris Wright as the Minister of Energy in the US might bring the long period of low prices to the oil gas industry of the US. He's known as an expert in fracking and passionate for increasing oil and gas production. Agricultural commodities future prices slipped after a positive vibe of a week ago. This decline is mostly connected with pessimistic expectations from Trump's future administration steps. Wheat futures slipped below 5.4 per bushel, marking a 10-week low as the US dollar surged to its strongest level since May, while rain in the US cropping areas improved the supply outlook. The Commodity Weather Group forecast significant moisture for US wheat regions affected by dryness, while rainfall in the Black Sea, a major wheat export hub facing drought conditions, is expected to support next year's crop. Meanwhile, Russia has shipped grain at near record levels despite low prices and domestic restrictions, reaching 45% of its estimated 60 million ton export capacity this season. In contrast, EU wheat exports dropped 30% year-over-year to 8.3 million tons only. Corn futures dropped by 1.6% to the level of $4.24 per bushel. The overwhelming price sentiment for corn this week has been negative, as corn traded in line with other crops. US corn harvest reached 95% complete, up from 91% the week ago, and 5-year average of 84%. US old crop corn export sales were at the lower end of expectations, with 1.3 million tons sold. At the same time, the US dollar surge is challenging thoughts that export demand can continue at the current pace. Soybeans futures fell below $10 per bushel from a one-month high a week ago, on expectations of lower demand amid an unfavorable environment for biofuel industry under the new Trump administration. Trump's nominee for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency head, Lee Zeldin, is expected to weaken the Renewable Fuel Standard program that requires transportation fuel sold in the United States to contain a minimum volume of renewable fuels. Additionally, China, the world's top soybean importer, is expected to cut its imports by 9.5% for the marketing year ending September 2025. Lowering demand to less than 100 million metric tons. Chinese buyers have been stockpiling ahead of the US election, anticipating that trade tensions with the US may worsen under Trump's return. Moving to the shipping industry. Containerized freight index marginally dropped by 50 points. Spot rates ex-China are mostly stable for all destinations, same as Europe to China. In the US, cumulative containers imports for the first 10 months of this year increased by 13% compared to a year ago. China remains the dominant source of US imports, which for the future is one of the largest uncertainties due to potential tariff barriers emergence. In Europe, many shippers are currently locked in negotiations with ocean container carriers for new long-term contracts coming into force in January. It is a tough moment for carriers because data shows long-term rates are falling globally, as well as at a trade level between the Far East and Europe. Thus, next year most likely container freight rates will struggle to find support. The Baltic Exchange Dry Index advanced by more than 19% versus a week ago and reached almost 1,800 points. This increase is bolstered by the bigger size segment. Capesize index jumped by almost 30 points due to high miners' activity across the globe. Rates for Capesize vessels increased quickly in both basins, and fixtures continued amid growing rates. Only in Handysize, another challenging week was marked as sentiment remained poor both in Atlantic and Pacific arenas. To sum up, downward rally in Urea that happened at the beginning of the last week eased by Friday with Egypt FOB prices coming back to mid-360s level. I would guess that this level is more or less the balanced level, taking into account current global fundamentals. The only major factor that might push the prices higher is natural gas futures in Europe that already started to increase. Multiple uncertainties related to the next year's gas supply to Europe might stimulate further price increase, which might force some of the European fertilizers producers stop amid worsening production economics. Bearish sentiment in Urea market last week and slim demand in Europe and Brazil influenced price drop in Amsul and nitrate segment. In phosphates, the prices seem to be overheated with demand limited in key markets, plus unclear situation with Bangladeshi purchase tender that seems to be scrapped again and re-announced again. Agricultural commodities future prices dropped mostly due to pessimistic expectations about the measures of new US president's administration, including dollar value strengthening that already started and potential tariff barriers. In the shipping industry, a robust activity of miners supports again significant increase in Baltic Dry Index, while containers operators are struggling to close profitable long contracts for the next year. So, let's see what is next around the corner, but it will be already next week. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, push the bell in order not to miss any updates, and see you soon.